welcome everyone. To start, I want to first introduce our speakers today. So we have a great panel. We have Andy from Houzz, who is right here with us. Andy is one of our QuickBooks integration specialists at Houzz and brings over 20 years of experience in finance. Formerly a bookkeeper, she's been with us assisting designers with the Houzz Pro QuickBooks Online integration for the past 6 years. So I'm sure many of you know Andy, or many of you talk to Andy. And if you haven't, please, Andy, can you introduce yourself also directly?
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Shoshana. Hi, everyone. Some of you may have spoken with me or emailed with me, but yes, I've been with Houzz. I was the first QuickBooks integration specialist back in the day when we were just Ivy. Now I've been able to see Ivy grow into what is now Houzz Pro. So it's been an amazing experience. Love working with our pros and everything. And just helping out with the integration with training and questions and doing stuff like this.
Amazing. Thank you, Andy. So we also have Ashley Mobley from Business by the Book. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit about your firm?
Hi, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shoshana, for organizing. Yes, I'm Ashley Mobley, Director of Operations and Client Services at Business by the Book. We are located in Georgia, but we specialize with interior designers. So we have clients all over the U.S. We have 15 employees, and we've been doing this for about 10 years. So we're full service bookkeeping.
Amazing. Thank you, Ashley. We're very excited to have you here. Brad, can you tell us a little bit about you? Welcome to the webinar.
Oh, thank you, Shoshana. Hello, everyone. I'm Bradford Schumann. I'm a CPA, and I'm the founder of Bradford Tax and Consulting. Since 2017, our firm has specialized in helping design firms with their accounting, their income tax planning, sales tax compliance, and just their overall business strategy. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today and try to provide some insights to help everyone streamline their finances and grow their business. And I want to thank Houzz and Shoshana for having me here.
Amazing. And Emily, so we have Emily from Logistics for Designers. Can you tell us a little bit about you and Logistics?
Yeah, definitely. We founded our company about 5 years ago, and we specialize in helping interior designers be more profitable. Like, that's our mission in life, is you found something that you love to do, but now we want to make sure you're making money. So we want to make sure that you can sustain your business. So our mission is to create a full service accounting firm. We help with sales tax. We have a sales tax accountant that just specializes in sales tax. We offer procurement services, CFO services, invoicing support on top of, as well as like the monthly bookkeeping and accounting services.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. So we have a great panel here today, and we're going to go through a lot of questions from designers, but I want to invite everyone to ask questions through the Q&A, and we'll go through them, hopefully. So, whenever we talk about the specific topic, or also at the end, we'll keep time for the end. And I think we want to get started. And the first question that we often get is from designers is why having a bookkeeper or CPA who's really specialized in the interior design industry is so important. Ashley, can you tell us, share your thoughts here?
Yeah, so we see designers come to us all the time that have had a generalized bookkeeper, someone who's not familiar with their industry, and so their bookkeeping can be a mess, or it could be costing them thousands of dollars in taxes. So if retainers are not recorded properly, you could end up spending thousands of dollars in taxes. So finding a bookkeeper and accountant who know your industry, know the ins and outs and the timing, but also your project management system. So if you're using Houzz and QuickBooks and that integration or whatever your project management system is, you want your bookkeeper to understand the software that you're using.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And I think it's good also to point out to everyone here, this audience, that we have a panel here of also not only accounting experts, but really experts in Houzz Pro and the Houzz Pro QuickBooks integration. So definitely you want a team with you who knows well about the software and knows well about your business. Andy, do you want to add some insights as well from your point of view?
Yeah. So one of the great things with Houzz Pro is obviously the ability to integrate with QuickBooks Online. You know, being able to go into Houzz, manage your projects, use all the wonderful features that Houzz Pro has for our designers, and then have that all just automatically flow into QuickBooks is great. You handle your overhead and things like that on payroll, all of that, those types of transactions on the QuickBooks side. You know, having a seamless integration where everything flows over, it's makes it so much easier for you to manage your projects, manage your business. We offer 30 days of free QuickBooks integration support. Houzz does. That would give you access to me, ability to email, do training, train your accountant, which is very important. If you have a bookkeeper, an accountant, anyone working in QuickBooks, we'll train them. The QuickBooks support is an added fee, but like I was saying, there is a 30 days of free support. So if you're new to the integration, if you're just connecting for the first time, if you've been integrated, but you've never spoken with our support team, you get those 30 days. So definitely take advantage of that. But I'll stress the importance of making sure if you have a bookkeeper, you have an accountant, you have someone working in QuickBooks handling transactions, you want to make sure they're privy to how the integration works.
Yeah, and it's a good transition also to just remind everyone that very quickly, I mean, we want to talk about best practices and we have a lot of questions, but the Houzz Pro to QuickBooks integration is actually a one-way sync. So you want to make sure that everything originates in Houzz Pro and then it flows seamlessly to QuickBooks. If we go back a little bit to the idea, okay, so it's very important for you as an interior design business to have an accountant, a bookkeeper who specialize, who understand your industry. Emily, can you tell us a little bit about what you think in terms of having, a bookkeeper versus an assistant? It's always a question from pros. Like, can you tell us a little bit what you've seen, what's helpful for designers?
Yeah, what we've seen really work is having that be two separate roles, right? So you have a bookkeeper that solely does your bookkeeping work. They're doing all the work in QuickBooks. So your accountant or your bookkeeper, they're handling everything in QuickBooks. So that includes categorizing transactions, matching items that match over from Houzz Pro, reconciliation, sales tax filing, financial reporting, checking that the information, this is key, checking that the information that is coming over from Houzz Pro from that one-way sync matches your bank records. That's really important. What we sometimes see is bookkeepers adding what's coming from Houzz Pro along with what's coming through the bank feed. So you need to make sure your bookkeeper's matching. So that's usually what the bookkeeper handles. And then what's really important is to also possibly have an admin or an in-house office person, order admin assistant. And it will really depend on what level you're at in your business. If that's a full-time, part-time person, if you have a virtual assistant that helps with that, and so forth. And what that person really should be doing is helping with the day-to-day. handling order admin, purchase order creation, recording payments on purchase orders once the order has been placed, checking that orders are received, lead times. Basically, they're more in Houzz Pro, where your bookkeeper is going to be in QuickBooks if you're integrated. And it's also really nice if you have two separate roles, that your order admin, your bookkeeper offers like a check and balance on your order admin person. You never want to give your in-house person full access to all your accounts, full access to all your financial data. There should be a professional, an accountant, that's checking what they're ordering, making sure that the purchase order matches your actuals, and doing that checks and balances on their work as well. And that tends to work really well if you have those two different roles separated out.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. And we're going to be talking about why purchase orders are so important later. I want to also get your opinion on what are the industry best practices important to follow in Houzz Pro. And I mean, we have a lot to cover, so it's going to be quick. But if you can give us a quick highlight overview here of industry best practices.
Yeah, it's really like the biggest reason to follow the different industry best practices is you really just want to limit your out-of-pocket liability. So the biggest thing that we just really want to remember is to always send proposals for payment. And I know different accounting firms might have different practices of what they teach their clients, but really we want to make sure we're sending proposals. Proposals are your working documents. The minute you get payment on a proposal, you turn it into an invoice. Now it shows up on your financial reporting. Now you owe sales tax on it. If we're sending a bunch of open invoices and you're a monthly filer, you're in one of the states where you're required to file sales tax monthly, you might be fronting sales tax before you collect the funds from your client. So if you're doing it that way, make sure you have a retainer and you have some sort of system where you're tracking that. It might just be a little bit more manual work on the accounting side. But yeah, that's pretty much the biggest reason why we want to follow best practices. We don't want to front money for sales tax, and we don't want to front money to our vendors. We don't want to pay our vendors before we have the money from the client. So we're following these best practices so that you can protect your profits, your cash reserves, your markup, however you want to phrase it. You just want to make sure you're not paying before you have the funds from your client.
Thank you so much, Emily. This is a great transition to the question that comes often, which is, what's the difference between a proposal and an invoice? Ashley, can you help us with this? How would you summarize it?
Yeah, so Emily hit it pretty hard. Your proposal is a working document. It's it's a non-financial document, so it doesn't do anything in QuickBooks until it's converted to an invoice. And so the proposal is more of a working document for estimating, for building it out for your clients. And then once you create the invoice, it should not be touched. So the invoice is more of a firm financial document. So you don't want to make that step until you're absolutely sure, because like Emily alluded to, there's sales tax implications and also financial liability step.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much, Ashley. So we have proposals. The proposal is going to be, you want to receive payment. It's going to be turned into an invoice. What about, can we talk a little bit about retainers and deposit?
Yeah, so we see this a lot, especially, you decided to talk to a client, you have this big project coming up in December, you're signing in December, but maybe you're not ordering the product until January. This is really where deposits and retainers are so important, is to make sure that you are not recording this income in a prior year when your expenses will be in the next year. That will increase your tax liability. And not accurately record your income. So deposits are important, especially at the beginning of or at the end of the year, but it can be important throughout the year too, depending on your how you report your financials. But we'll talk more about that.
Thank you so much. Anybody wants to add anything about this on this proposals, invoices, retainer, deposits? Emily, Brad, Andy, feel free to chime in.
I will say one thing. Thank you, Houzz Pro. I love your retainer request and how you can do it within the software. It's super easy to use. I think that's a real benefit to the software. You don't see that in a lot of other project management software. So I love that Houzz Pro has that feature.
I think the one thing that I might add would be that the importance of, that Ashley mentioned, of collecting payment from your client before paying your vendors and paying sales tax. I've had clients ask us, hey, should we collect, 100% deposit or a 50% deposit? We always stress to clients that they should collect 100% upfront for any product purchases. Reason being is often once you turn around and place the order with the vendor, even if you're providing the vendor with a 50% deposit, you're essentially providing them with a 100% commitment. And oftentimes the markup is less than that 50% deposit. So we've seen a lot of situations where clients have been really kind of saved by, collecting 100% up front so that they're not sort of, to Emily's point, liable down the road for something.
Amazing. And we are actually getting questions about this from the audience. So someone asking us, so you are asking clients to provide a blanket retainer to cover future purchases. How would you answer that? Like if someone wants
I'll chime in. I'd say the majority of clients for our interior designers, a lot of them are going to want like a detailed proposal before providing deposit on product purchases. That being said, every now and then, you'll get a really great client who, might really trust you and say, hey, here, I'm going to provide you with this retainer for product before items have been specifically specified. That's usually more of an exception, but Houzz Pro is designed to where you could collect a large retainer for product and then apply that retainer to proposals as you're specifying those items.
Yeah, and what we have seen work really well as well is not just on product, but also on time billing. So a lot of what I always encourage is collect the funds before you do the work. So obviously, if you do flat rate, collect the flat rate from your client before you do the work. But if you're billing hourly and you have a monthly cadence of sending out time billing invoices, collect a retainer on that. Have that in your contract. So for example, you scope out the project, you say, okay, I think this is going to cost us $30K for just our design time. Then what you would do is you would set up maybe it's 3 different retainers for your time billing of 10K each. You collect the retainer through Houzz Pro for time billing, 10K. You keep applying it to that time invoice that you set up monthly. Once they get close to exhausting that 10K, that's just for the design time, then you'll collect the second one and continue on that way. We find designers being really profitable when they're doing it in that way. That way, if you have a team or if you have to pay yourself, you have the money before you do the work, and then you avoid having to go back and keep asking for collection on that time invoice, because that tends to be the one type of invoice that your clients don't always rush to pay.
Thank you, Emily. That's really great. And I see we're getting questions on the differences between retainer versus deposit. So I think that was a great use case to share about retainer. What's a good use case for the deposit? We're also seeing that there's some confusion about getting the payment on the proposal, and would that be a deposit? When do you recommend, guys, Ashley and Brad and Emily and Andy, when do you recommend to ask for a deposit versus a retainer? Can you?
I think the main difference is just kind of like the verbiage behind a deposit and a retainer, where generally speaking, a retainer is going to be more general and sort of like being applied against, items that are kind of more specified, later, while a deposit usually implies that it's for a specific thing. So like, you might have a proposal for cabinetry, and you're going to collect a deposit against that cabinetry proposal. So they are really similar in the sense that they're both advanced payments. But again, I think a deposit, it just kind of implies that it's a little bit more specific to items that have already been specified, or time billing that's more specific.
Amazing. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I see we're getting a lot of questions, so don't worry. We'll also get back to you after. I want to make sure that we cover all the different topics. We want to talk a little bit now about sales tax, a great topic. Brad, so we're working on that proposal invoices. How does it work? Do I need to charge sales tax on my design time? Can you tell us?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, it is a little bit of a loaded question, as sales tax is always state specific. There is no such thing as a federal sales tax. So the sales tax that you owe is always going to be based on the specific state that you're operating out of, or if you're doing projects out of state, it's going to be governed by the state that project is in. So every state kind of has their own specific rules around sales tax on design fees. So thankfully, the majority of states do not require you to charge sales tax on design fees. So most people are going to be sort of, able just to bill clients the design fee without having to include any sales tax. And then those sales are reported as non-taxable service sales on your monthly, quarterly, or annual sales tax returns. That being said, there are states out there that do require you to charge sales tax on any of your design fees. The big ones to note are New York. New York essentially requires all interior designers to charge sales tax on essentially all design fees, no matter what. Something to note in New York is that there is a sort of special sales tax rate for design fees, specifically in New York City. California is another one that sales tax may be applicable to design fees, and California's stance is whether the design fees are related to procurement, sourcing, and taxable sales. So, an invoice that says, 10 hours for ordering living room furniture in California would be subject to sales tax. And then there's a state like Minnesota, for instance, design fees are taxable when you're selling that same customer furniture. So, if you're just providing, design, services to a client in Minnesota, you actually wouldn't have to charge any sales tax on those design fees. But once it becomes sort of a full service project with procurement, those design fees then become taxable. But it's generally going to be one of those where it's going to be best to consult with a tax professional to make sure that you sort of know sort of the circumstances for your particular state. South Dakota is another one where design fees are taxable. So yeah, it's quite, a little bit of a mixed bag, but for the most part, most states, it is non-taxable.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Brad, for this. We also getting the question about markup. Is markup taxable as well?
Yeah, great question. So generally, every state considers the markup as a part of the product sale. And so the entire sales price of the product is subject to sales tax. So we get that question all the time where clients will say, hey, can I invoice my markup separately, and not charge sales tax? Technically, you're not allowed to do that. We have seen some clients where, they essentially increase, they charge a more substantial design fee, and they pass on a more significant portion of their trade discount to, from their vendors to clients. But generally speaking, all markup is part of the taxable product sales.
Sounds good. Let me know, Ashley, Emily, and if you want to add anything before we talk more about other items on our sales tax FAQ. Feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would really add, Bradford explained that really well. I think the only thing I would add is if you are in a state where services are taxed, New York just says tax all design time. So you do want to make sure that your product invoice and your time invoices are separate. You can't have your time, your billable, or your taxable time and product on the same invoice in New York, because there's two different sales tax rates. So that's a common mistake we sometimes see in Houzz Pro. And then the other thing, if you're in a state like California, where they make it a little bit more confusing, where you have to think about what's taxable and what's not, we actually have a template, or you can add this into Houzz Pro, where you list out different categories. And we usually put like a little star next to the categories that are taxable. And then you mark them off as taxable, so that when your team's entering their time, they just select the item without having to think about if it's taxable or not. So then when you go to create your time billing invoices in Houzz Pro, you can just pull it through and it's automatically already marked as taxable or non-taxable. And then all you have to do as the designer is just do a quick review before you send it out to your client. So there's certain things you can do to make sure that you're charging sales tax accurately. And in California, there's a publication for interior designers that explains all this. So it's called the CDTFA Publication 35 for interior designers and decorators.
Thank you for sharing that, Emily. Thank you. Going back to you, Brad. So we talked about markup, we talked about design time. Can you give us advice on shipping?
Yeah, totally. So shipping is definitely a hot topic in the world of sales tax. I've actually seen designers argue on this subject when they were actually both right, which, on that note, it's generally 50-50 in terms of states making shipping taxable or not. So, roughly half the states in the US that have sales tax, make you charge sales tax on shipping. Roughly the other half don't. So, really it's just going to depend on your jurisdiction. A really great reference for this topic is the website called TaxJar. And they actually have, essentially a guide for each different state that goes into whether or not shipping is taxable, and then kind of dives into some of the nuances of it as well. Some states aren't too complicated, where it's very much kind of like a yes or a no. But something to be aware of is some states kind of have slightly different definitions for shipping and freight, in terms of there's kind of like the piece that comes from the vendor. The vendor charges you shipping, and then there's all of the sort of the freight and shipping related to the receiver, and potentially like inspection charges, storage charges. So some states actually make it to where that the storage and warehousing, what have you, is non-taxable, and then the vendor shipping is taxable. So again, it's one of those where each state's going to be kind of very specific as to how they define taxable shipping. But again, TaxJar is a really great reference for that topic, and it's also a great thing just to check with a tax professional and make sure that you're sort of doing the right thing in your specific circumstance.
Amazing, thank you. So we're getting questions. People in the audience want to hear again. So you said TaxJar, and Emily, you mentioned. Can you say that again? the great resource, the name of the guide.
Yes, it's called the CDTFA, which is the entity that collects sales tax in California. It's called the CDTFA Publication 35 for interior designers and decorators. And Shoshana, I can message it to you. I have the PDF right here if you want it.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll share that also as a follow-up. But I'm gonna put it in the Q&A so you guys can see it. Oh, someone posted it. Alana, thank you so much for posting that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. I think the other thing to note as well, to Bradford's point on shipping being taxable in some states, if you're check with your state. If you're marking up on shipping, that could also make it taxable. So again, every state's different. I would really check with your accountant. A lot of these states you can call and ask to talk to a sales tax expert or rep, and always ask to get it in writing so that you have it written down what they end up telling you, because sometimes it could change depending on who you're talking to.
And Brad said tax jar, right?
Exactly. Yeah. The JAR, tax jar.
Amazing. So we have so many questions. We are also getting questions on Houzz Pro. So I know, Emily, so you mentioned keeping products and time billing in different invoices for the tax rates. Andy, there is a question.
If you're in New York, if you're in New York, yeah.
Because Andy, maybe you can answer to that also coming as our Houzz Pro expert here. Is there a way to adjust tax by product item on an invoice rather than just one tax rate for the entire invoice? Because some vendors charge different tax percentage based on their locations. What would you say here for Flynn?
So on the invoicing side, just to touch on that quickly, like with New York, the tax rate for product is higher. I forget, it's 8 point something. But the tax rate on interior design fee is about half that. So you can't have the two in Houzz Pro. You can't have two different tax rates on one invoice, which is why Emily was saying to have one for, again, specific to New York, your invoice for product, which would have we'll just say 8%, your separate invoice for services, which would have the 4.35%. As far as vendor tax, so that a little bit different than the tax you're collecting from your clients. The vendor tax, you purchase from a vendor, they charge you sales tax. On your purchase order, as many of you have seen, you can select a tax rate and have sales tax calculated on your products. Now, if your project is set for, say, 8% tax, and that's what's populating as the tax rate, but the vendor's charging you, say, 9% tax, you can change that rate there. You can add a new rate from the document so that it calculates properly to what they're charging you. If it becomes complicated where, rounding is off, it's a few cents off, things like that, you can opt to not have the sales tax automatically calculated, but rather add a line item on the purchase order for sales tax. And without going into the exact specifics of that, you would set up a service for vendor tax, add it as a line item separately. So you can just plug in a dollar amount for what they're charging you. One other quick thing I wanted to mention about sales tax, because I know this is just sales tax in pretty much any state is just a beast. It's complicated, it's complex, and then you want to make sure you're charging and collecting the correct sales tax and remitting that to your state. It's important for destination-based states, California, New York, many states, the sales tax is calculated on the project location, not your business location. So for example, California, Orange County, 7.75% sales tax. But I have a project in Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, 9.5% is the rate I want to charge. Maybe I'm doing a job in Santa Monica. That's, I believe, 10.25, even though it's part of LA. So it's very important. Something I always stress when I am talking to our pros, you want to make sure you're charging the right tax rate for your project. If you need to go to the CDTFA, if you're in California, you can look it up by city, by county. Pretty much any state, you can go on to your governing tax agency's website and look up rates. Avalara is another one that you can go in and Google or search the zip code and make sure you're charging the right rate. So super important.
And something to note on that, Andy, is I always tell our clients that you actually have to, in destination-based states, check the sales tax rate based on the project's specific address. So what we've often found is in California, you could have a project that's in an unincorporated part of a city where the sales tax rate will be different because you don't have to pay the city portion of the sales tax. So to your point, yeah, most states have like a sales tax lookup tool where you can essentially key in a specific address and it will tell you exactly what rate you should be charging, and often to the breakdown of how much of that is the state rate, how much of that is the county rate, how much of that might be the city rate. Thankfully, there are some states where there's just one statewide rate, but yeah, some states like California and New York definitely make it a little bit more complicated.
Amazing. Thank you, Brad. So I want to make sure we cover other topics as well. Sales tax. We can spend the whole day talking about sales tax. So we talked about proposals, invoices, retainers, deposit. I want to talk a little bit about purchase orders and why they're so important. Emily, can you tell us your thoughts on that one and what you advise your clients?
Yeah, we advise our clients to create purchase orders for everything. Or I guess when I say everything, I mean all purchases on a project. We want to create a purchase order. So we sent our proposal for payment. The minute we got our proposal paid, we turned it into an invoice. Now we owe sales tax on that invoice. Then from the paid invoice, we want to create in Houzz Pro the purchase orders directly. And what's really important is now we have the purchase order in Houzz Pro that matches the cost that we have on the invoice. So it matches the cost of what your client paid, obviously plus the markup. So your purchase order should be open for reference while you're ordering. And so while you're ordering, you want to order exactly what you have on your purchase order because that's ultimately what the client paid for. So we have our purchase order. Once we place the order, we record the payment on the purchase order. You want that to sync over to QuickBooks Online. And then if you have a bookkeeper or an in-house bookkeeper or whatever, they should be making sure that every vendor charge coming through your bank feed matches a purchase order from Houzz Pro. Now, if it does not match a purchase order, then they should be sending you a report as a red flag saying, hey, you have a purchase order from Restoration for $2,000, but a charge just came in for $4,000. So your bookkeeper should be helping you catch what's being purchased out of pocket or maybe eating into your markup so that you're not paying more to the vendor than what you've charged your client is ultimately the goal of using the integration to Houzz Pro. The other thing that I think is really, really, really useful in using purchase orders is in QuickBooks, you can actually run a P&L by project. So if you're syncing the purchase orders, if you're using purchase orders for all your project related costs, then in QuickBooks, you can run a P&L by customer project, and you can see how profitable each project is. And that can really be helpful, aligning it with what your ideal client profile is. And you can start to, bring in the projects that are more profitable for you. And it's pretty insightful to see that report.
Thank you so much, Emily. Ashley, do you want to add something there about what you advise your clients also about purchase orders and recording everything?
Yeah, I mean, we have several clients that come to us that have not previously been recording purchase orders because vendors don't require purchase orders. Why do I need a purchase order? And so like Emily said, is so important for tracking project profitability and for making sure that you charge the client one price for it, and now you know, 2-3 weeks later going in to purchase it, has the price changed, has something updated, that you need to collect more money from your client. So purchase orders are very important for designers. It can be significant amount of admin work. So hopefully you have a bookkeeper that can help you with that too. Because it's a lot to maintain and to make sure that the shipping gets added when it actually ships and things like that. So there's a lot of admin to it, but it's very important for you to make financial decisions to have the purchase orders in place.
Thank you so much, Ashley. And we're getting more questions. I want to answer a couple of them. And again, if your question is not answered, we'll follow up after the webinar to make sure that you get an answer. So don't worry. What if we end up paying less for a product than we indicated on the PO? What would you say there, Emily and Ashley? Yeah.
I mean, what's the difference? I would say keep it. You already charged the client. I don't know, Ashley, what do you guys
Yeah,
think?
we would say the same thing. That's your profit that you know, if you got a different discount when you ordered, but also making sure that you update the purchase order though to match what actually is getting charged. And it's so important for your bookkeeper. Like Emily mentioned, you're trying to match the transactions. And so if you're paying 50%, that's the payment amount that you should record in Houzz Pro on your purchase order. And so that should match. That's what we're looking for when we're doing your bookkeeping, is making sure that it's matching. And if it's not, like Emily said, we're going to flag it for you to tell us.
I think one thing to note on that too is just it sometimes might be dependent on the contract you have specifically with the client. Generally, we advise against essentially specifying in the contract that we're going to, have a specific markup percentage on the cost, because then, in a scenario like that, you almost just have to like circle back and refund the client. But yeah, generally, if a vendor charges you less, you're going to adjust the purchase order to match what was charged. And, in an ideal world, that's going to be, additional markup income.
Yeah. And also in Houzz Pro, purchase orders are not client facing. The purchase orders are the company's cost. Do make sure that you're not adding your vendor invoices / purchase orders as an attachment on the proposal or invoice, because your client will see that. I've seen that mistake happen. So that's usually not something you want to share with your clients. I know there are some interior design firms that are very upfront about their pricing, but if you're one of those firms that want to keep that private, make sure not attach that to the invoice or purchase order.
And in terms of measuring profitability, so we got a question about can I measure? So I can't measure profitability by project unless I use POs in Houzz Pro. What would you say there for industry best practices? We're talking about recording everything and pushing everything into QuickBooks so you can pull out that P&L report. Emily, What would you say to Kathleen?
I know that there are a lot of, you might be at a level in your business where you're not connected to QuickBooks yet, and maybe you're doing all the aspects of QuickBooks manually and you're only using Houzz Pro. That's fine. It's just going to create more work for you. You'll have to add everything from your bank activity into a spreadsheet. So it ends up becoming a little bit more tedious. Or Houzz Pro and their mapping also has the ability to turn off the purchase order function so that you're not matching it to QuickBooks. Just make sure if you turn off the purchase order matching that you're using a spreadsheet or you have an internal process to track the actuals against what you invoiced. But I'm a huge advocate for using the integration and leveraging the technology so that you're not having to do as much manual work. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I think in terms of best practices, what we say is you have purchase orders in Houzz Pro, you should use it. It's there for you, and push them into QuickBooks, and that will really help you and the team and your bookkeeper measure profitability the best way. So we're getting also questions. There's so much to talk about, but I want to talk about returns a little bit. We got a question from the audience, and that's something anyway, also a topic we wanted to cover. Brad, I'm gonna just read you that question we got, because I think it summarized really everything we keep hearing from our designers. So just trying to find it in the list of the million questions we got. So I struggle with how to input the returns in Houzz Pro. I find it easiest to settle up on returns with clients around the same time that I'm doing my monthly billing for design services. Would you recommend creating an invoice for those return items with negative dollar amounts? Like, how to handle returns? What do you advise? What do you?
So this is a great question, and definitely a thorn in a lot of interior designer side. In a perfect world, the items that you specify are going to be what's installed, but as we all know, often there's going to be respecifications. There are things that are on back order. So generally speaking, we advise our clients to lean in on the proposal function as much as possible. The nice thing again about proposals is it's a working document. So, as you make changes to the proposal, it's sort of, it hasn't yet been recorded and reported on a sales tax return. So you don't have to worry about, sort of editing that proposal and what implications it's going to have on past sales tax reporting. So in an ideal world, what you would do is you would zero out the item on the proposal. This would be in the case if it hasn't yet been invoiced. The reason I say zero it out is because if you zero out the item, instead of just deleting the line item, it gives you a little bit of like a breadcrumb trail for you to kind of better understand what happened, especially if your client's asking you questions months later and things are a little bit fuzzy. You could then actually add new items or respecified items to that proposal. Depending on if you're removing more dollar amount or adding more dollar amount, it's either going to create a credit on that proposal or a additional balance due on that proposal. And at that point, you could either refund the credit to the client, or you can apply that credit against another invoice. Now, where the return side of things gets a little bit more complicated is when the item being returned has already been invoiced and reported on a sales tax return. In that scenario, you have to be really careful because you want to ensure that the way you're processing the return ensures that you get your sales tax back from the state that you paid it to. So if an invoice has already been generated for that sale and it's been included on a sales tax return, we mentioned earlier that generally you don't want to adjust that invoice anymore. And then there's probably just two really good ways to address it. And I think the person asking the question kind of nailed it on the head. Is one of the options is to add that item as a negative on a future invoice, and that will essentially create negative sales tax, so to speak, to be sort of credited on the next period. In the case of there not being any more invoices being issued to the client, another way to approach it would be to create a credit memo in QuickBooks. If you're someone using the QuickBooks integration, a credit memo is essentially the opposite of an invoice and sort of represents a return being made to the client. And then we'll often record that credit memo as a retainer balance that could then be either refunded or applied against design fee invoice or future orders. If the item hasn't been reported on a sales tax return, but it is on an invoice, you still essentially can adjust that invoice up until it being reported on a sales tax return. I think the biggest takeaway is if you're dealing with a return and it's something that's already been reported on your sales tax returns, it's definitely best to connect with your bookkeeper and accountant in that scenario, just to make sure that everything's being captured in the right period.
Thank you, Brad. That was super detailed and helpful. And we're getting an interesting question from Julie in the audience, saying, but they just taught us to use a proposal swap to invoice before ordering happens. So returns will happen after it's an invoice. So what would you say to that? And please.
Yeah, so generally we advise our clients to convert the proposal to an invoice once those items have been installed and delivered, so that you essentially are not reporting items that might be respecified or come in damaged on sales tax returns. That being said, every accounting firm is going to have some of their own sort of processes. So generally, we advise, again, to sort of hold that proposal as a working document until those items are sort of finalized and the dust is settled, so to speak.
If you're doing it that way, make sure you need to manually track your sales tax liability, so you're not spending the sales tax that you're going to owe. So make sure.
And that's a great point, Emily, is that in general, I'd say as a design firm, one of the biggest sort of accounting headaches is always, having processes and systems in place to track what funds are earmarked to pay vendors and to pay sales tax, and what funds are actually sort of yours to pay yourself, pay operating costs, invest in marketing. And there's a couple of solutions that we've devised for clients where you can actually use a few different bank accounts and sort of manage them in a way that lets you sort of kind of track, hey, this is money that I know is going to be remitted to California, and this is
don't touch it, don't spend it,
to actually utilize.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Andy, do you want to add something there? Anything that you recommend pros to do on Houzz Pro? So specifically, I know we also want to mention that client refunds cannot be processed through Houzz Pro. So, right, you can of course receive online payments and everything through Houzz Pro, but not process a refund. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, with that, I know we have, like, let's say you have a portion of $5,000 retainer, they only use $4,000, you're going to refund them $1,000. You can mark that in Houzz Pro as refunded. However, you do, if you're integrated with QuickBooks, you do still need to go into QuickBooks and follow a couple of steps to record that refund check properly. If anyone has questions on that, please write into support. We can send you a step-by-step on how to record those refunds. But to what both Brad and Emily were saying, if you end up, you have an invoice, you've paid sales tax, that invoice has been a part of a sales tax filing, now you owe the client a credit. Ideally, what you want to do is on a new invoice with products and taxable products, add that negative line item so that you can, refund your customer or give them that credit back. You cannot do an invoice in Houzz Pro for a negative amount. So you can't just create an invoice, standalone invoice with returns on it. There needs to be other taxable items on that invoice. So if it ends up being a case where you don't have any future invoices to create, it more than likely becomes a refund situation. And again, if you reach out to Houzz support, we can give you those steps on how to handle credit memo or a refund check in QuickBooks, so your accounting is lined up correctly.
Yeah, and it might be easier to create the proposal while you're trying to figure out selections. Do like a negative proposal while you're trying to figure out what you're going to offset against that. Also, I think what's really important, where we see a lot of errors in the sales tax reporting, is when you're doing that negative line item on the proposal or the invoice, you have to offset it, like Andy mentioned, to taxable items. That's key, or otherwise it's almost like either your bookkeeper has to do a manual thing on the back end, or you're offsetting it against nothing. So it's easier to offset it against taxable items for sure.
So thank you so much. I want to be conscious of time. We have 3 minutes left. We still have so many people with us because there's so many questions. I wanted to talk a little bit about reports, and we keep talking about sales tax. There's a sales tax report, of course, on Houzz Pro. But, Ashley, can you tell us about what reports should I be looking at as an interior designer monthly, on a monthly basis? Can you tell us what you're looking at, what you advise your clients to do?
Yeah, so you should be, if you have a bookkeeper, they should be sending you timely financial reports for you to review. And if you're pulling them yourselves, a balance sheet, your profit and loss are important to review. Your liabilities, like Emily mentioned, knowing what your sales tax liability is, knowing what retainer balances you have out there. So reviewing those reports, and then reviewing your profit and loss statement, of course. And then open invoices, or your AR and AP reports are very important to make sure that everything is syncing over properly from Houzz Pro to QuickBooks. And so it's important that that information is reconciled monthly. Your AP report is going to tell you what you have outstanding for your vendors. It's going to help you catch, if you're, I know we haven't got to this yet, but if you're a cash or accrual client, if you have bills that maybe you created a PO and then that order got canceled and you forgot to go in and close out the PO and it was already sent over as a bill, those reports are important to review because they affect your profit and loss statement and your income. So I know we're rushed for time, but I try to make that as brief as possible.
Look at, I think it's so important to check your bookkeeper or accountant's work.
Yep.
Go into QuickBooks. If you never log into QuickBooks, please, as a business owner, go into QuickBooks, go to reports, go in the little search bar and type in collections report. That tells you so much about if cleanup's being done, if things are being checked for sales tax rates. Pull that report. It should be accurate with all your open invoice and client retainers. If it's not, go to your bookkeeper and say, you need to update this. You can check a lot of their work that way. I feel like that gives us a lot of info.
Brad, anything you want to add here? I know
I would just add that when looking at your profit and loss as an interior designer, there's really two angles that we stress are sort of important to look at it by. It's really easy just to look at kind of the P&L as a whole, but sometimes there's really a lot of like condensing going on there. So we always advise our clients to look both at the profit and loss by project, which really lets you, kind of hone in again on, which projects are profitable, how much design fee do we have by project, what kind of markup do we have by project. That also allows you to do some reasonableness checks in terms of, hey, are these projects even, displaying properly in my bookkeeping? The other one that's really important is the profit and loss by month. And I would argue that that's best used for analyzing and managing your operating expenses, things like marketing, rent, payroll, software subscriptions. So that can really let you kind of hone in on, okay, well, what is a regular monthly budget for my operating costs? And that can also kind of help you set some goals in terms of, monthly design fees and sort of really kind of make sure that your business is running profitably.
You want a gross profit margin between 40 and 60%. Aim for that if you can.
So I know we're on time. We have so many questions. I want to remind everyone that I'll for sure will share the recording, will follow up and answer the questions that were asked. I'm also sharing here the contact info of our great speakers on the screen. So please take note of their website and feel free to reach out to them directly. Sorry. Well, right there, I'm going to stop touching the mouse, but feel free to reach out to them directly if you have more questions. Just to close this, I want to say what advice, what best practices, I mean, we could spend the entire session here, but what do you see profitable interior design businesses do? And maybe everybody can have a quick answer for that. So let's start with you, Emily, and let's quickly answer that.
I think number one thing, follow best practices. Make sure you're not burning through your cash reserves. If I have to say one big takeaway.
Amazing. Brad, do you want to add something there?
I would say one of the most common issues I see revolves often around time tracking and ensuring that the design fees that you're billing clients are really actually fair and accurate. And the way that looks is if you're billing hourly, both as the business owner and all of your staff, you really need to be tracking all of your time, even the non-billable time. That will kind of really let you hone in on inefficiencies and ensuring that your staff are billable. But even with like flat rate projects, it's important to after projects are complete to kind of do a gut check and say, okay, well, we charged a $20,000 flat fee. How much time did myself and my staff really spend, and use that as a learning exercise to sort of ensure that you're quoting projects correctly and you're not underselling yourself.
Thank you so much. Ashley, do you want to add something there also?
Yeah, I just think having a team behind you to help you, like what we're doing right here, you want to have experts who can talk you through some best practices and who have seen this business run successfully in the past. So I think having good experts in your corner from the beginning really help.
Yeah, and I think it's a great way also to close the loop on what we were saying early at the beginning of the session. You want to be working with someone who knows about your industry, the interior design business industry. You want to work with experts like the speakers we have here today. It's very important. And we're also here with, Houzz Pro, Andy, and other people in the team to help you really run a successful business. We're very excited to have so many of you with us today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for all the questions. We'll follow up with a recording. We'll follow up with more answers. I'm so sorry we didn't manage to get to all the questions here from the audience. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have more sessions like this because it's been really, really so insightful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shoshana.
Thank you.